Hi everyone, I'm Haneen. I'm wearing my uniform, which is my big fluffy Rick and Morty fleecy jumper. And we're going to be demoing a grievance badly done, and where I give feedback to Georgie in a way that's not very owned. Georgie, can I talk to you about something?
Yeah, sure.
Um, I feel like just back then when we were having this conversation, it really felt we were in a group and somehow it felt like you were hijacking the conversation and like not wanting me to be a part of it. Like every time someone asked me a question, it was like you would just jump in and interfere. And yeah, it almost felt like you just didn't want me to be there. Um, like what's up with that?
Mm. Um, yeah, interfere. I'm not sure how to respond to that. Like it was your decision, your choice to like join the conversation or not. Like I wasn't interfering or trying to do anything to stop you contributing.
You literally like every time I was going to ask a question, answer it, you would just dive in. That's what it felt like.
Uh-huh. And you have a voice and you could just also dive in yourself, right?
Oh my God, I don't I feel like you're just gaslighting my experience. What the fuck?
You have personal agency.
Okay, I you know what, I think it's better that we just don't have group conversations together. It feels like whenever we're in a shared space, it doesn't seem to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, cool. So Georgie, like, what do you think? What do you think to that conversation?
oh, it just feels icky.
I got that. It was like this rabbit in headlights feeling when I said my stuff. You're like, ah.
Yeah, I notice like you're not owning your experience, you're making interpretations about what I am trying to do and coming from assuming I'm coming from a place of malintent, which
Mm.
therefore I feel a sense of being blamed. And it also seems like this is black and white, like you're not interested and curious about my story and about what's happening for me and helping me understand what it's like for you. It comes across as very accusatory rather than an invitation or like a request, a clear request of what to do. And yeah, I notice I feel defensive and I want to just like stand my ground to be like, well, it's your problem, basically.
Yeah.
Is what I ended up doing.
Right. Yeah. It's true because I could feel instead of you being invited in, and I was making it really hard for you to respond with any level of empathy
Mm.
and curiosity about my experience because I just dove right in, as you said. And it's no wonder that you couldn't meet me where I wanted you to meet me.
Mm.
And I want to say this is an example of like more inflammatory, right? Meaning fire and fire. And there's another version of conflict where more of you might be familiar with, which is just this like passive, sort of like accepting, pleasing. Of course, I don't mind. Brush it under the carpet.
I love the tone of your voice.
Yeah,
It's all okay.
it's all going to be fine. And we don't need to even demo that because the chances are you probably wouldn't even say anything. You probably wouldn't even bring
Mm.
it up.
Yeah, I guess it would be like, oh, okay, right, sure. Yeah, I won't do that again.
Right. Yeah, as in you would respond that way.
Yeah, that's what I think it would be quite, it would be like a kind of like, oh, I'm feeling shame, I'm gonna close down and I don't really want to upset my friend or anymore. So I'm just gonna agree to whatever their desire is, essentially. Even though I don't really understand it or think it's true.
Nice. Right. I love that. Attempt like shame, like instantly clouds your ability to connect to yourself and what you think about the situation. And instead, a very quick, I won't do that. Like desperation to maintain the connection. So
Mm.
quickly just say, oh, it's okay. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm the bad person here. So we're going to contrast this with a good example of the same incident,
Mm.
but this time bringing it up in a more empowered way. Georgie, I would love to share something with you about what happened early this afternoon. And I wonder if you have capacity.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I really appreciate that. Yeah, now's a good time actually. What's up?
Beautiful. Yeah, it feels a little vulnerable to mention this, but I noticed that when we were having lunch in a group of people, I was really enjoying the connection with John. We were sort of going back and forth on this topic. And I guess my story is that there was maybe part of you was maybe looking out for the group or something like this. And I noticed that you redirected some questions towards other people in the group. And I felt a little deflated in that moment, as though it was like, oh, does my voice not matter? There are all these stories of like, oh, people don't want to hear what I want to have, what I have to say. And I felt like this was important to bring up because you're such a dear friend of mine, and I would love to be reassured, I guess, that that wasn't the case and that you do value my voice in groups, and be here a bit more understanding of like what that was like for you and your version of the story. Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Mm. Mm. I really appreciate that you can feel safe enough to share that with me. In our friendship's really important to me that I care about you, and I'm really sorry that you felt a little bit excluded, it sounds like, and you maybe had the sense that I didn't care for your voice and your opinion and wanted to include you in an equal way to everybody else, and that perhaps wasn't fair. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. I appreciate the empathy, actually. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened.
And I notice it's hard for me to remember exactly what happened, I said, because I was kind of so in the moment. So I'm so curious, like, if you can remember specific instances of when that happened. Perhaps I just was totally unconscious and trying to bring other people in and didn't notice you in the same way. So yeah, I'm curious if you could give me some more details so I can understand where it was, so I can do something different.
Beautiful. Yeah, I have so many reflections. Do you want to start?
Yeah, okay, absolutely happy to start. I notice in myself, like, I just feel relaxed and grounded, and I feel actually closer to you rather than like there's been a conflict in some respect. And I think this is so interesting to point out in these kinds of conversations, is we often have the belief that this is going to destroy trust and make our connection really hard and further apart. But actually, I'm feeling closer to you right now. And I think it's partly because I'm really feeling like I'm getting your world and understanding how you experience things more, and that you're inviting me into it. Instead of just like saying like, this is my version of events and you did wrong. It's more like, hey, let me tell you a little bit about how I experienced this. And I'm really aware that my version of events is just a story, essentially. And I really like to find a way to do something different here, but I'm not fixed on what that might look like. So it felt like the language was really owned, even from like the point at the beginning where you were like, hey, is this a good time to talk to you? Like, you really gave me choice and invited me to be able to say no as well. So I felt like my boundaries were being appreciated at that point too.
I love that summary. Yeah, I think pretty much just to like draw attention to some of those tools used, which I know I appreciate for me and Georgie, they've become a little bit more like easier to adopt rather than formulaic. But the first thing was that little check-in, right? It was like, hey, I wonder if you'd be open to this conversation. And the second one that I did was to share a little bit of the vulnerability of bringing up this conversation, as opposed to just diving in with my version of the event. The third thing that I did was to set up the context of what was happening and a little bit more like observational, like how I was, and then saying, I have a story that X happened. And I went in with generous assumptions. I think, as Georgie highlighted, I was, I imagine that it was like this for you. But I would love, and this is where I came in with very specific needs, which, again, I have to say, it's very hard to know what we want. So this is ninja level stuff, but I asked for two things. I asked for reassurance that Georgie doesn't think I'm unworthy of attention in a group and that she values my contributions, because I have a whole wound around this, not feeling like worthy of my contributions. And the second was to bring curiosity and understand her perspective of the experience, so that I could have a sense of correcting the stories that I had about the event. So I really appreciated the way you responded, because there was a lot of, hey, I want to find out more. Could you give me more specific instances? And you also reflected and empathized with me and my experience, which immediately like gives me this sense of ease. Like, okay, she's not going into defensiveness. She's actually like trying to get to understand my perspective.
Yeah, it's a really great summary. And I would also add as well that I think our natural inclination when we are perceiving feedback is to want to justify, like, I didn't do that badly, like, I'm not a bad person, love me, kind of thing. And I can even still feel that in my body. There is a desire to just dive in and be like, let me correct you and tell you how actually it was for me.
Right.
So I'm very intentionally pausing, and trying to put myself in a position of, you've just been really vulnerable to come out here and share this with me. Let me first of all help you feel a sense of connection by me giving you empathy for your experience. By the way, you don't have to agree with somebody's experience to give them empathy. You have to say, I see that you have a perspective and you have a set of experiences. I'm never going to quite get what it is, but I'm interested in finding out and checking in with you on that. So I'm giving empathy first of all. And then I'm also accepting I am never going to properly understand your experience. So let me get curious. Am I understanding what you said correctly? I'm going to reflect back what that is, make sure we're on the same lines. And also, it helps Haneen understand, oh, she is hearing me. That's exactly what she heard me say. She does care. It also clarifies if there are misunderstandings, because, it's hard to remember everything of what somebody says. And we're always interpreting language in different ways. So we're checking in, we're getting aligned. This is the first part of the feedback conversation, which is super important, is can we show that we're listening and we care for this, and can we get curious? Yeah. And from that point, we can then start to get into specifics of like, oh, what actually happened? What are the behaviors? What do we see and hear? What was the impact of that? Where could this be different? And then at that point, and we haven't got time for this, but we'll go into like, how might we navigate this? Like, what is the request? What is the need that I need to know to be able to do some behavior change in future scenarios?
I love this. It's interesting because I'm hearing all of this and I'm wondering if people are overwhelmed almost, thinking like, wow, there are so many things to consider and so many tools and ways of addressing this. And I want to say that that's why our course is different, because what we want to do is not just give you the cognitive tools of what to say, but to really address the underlying mindset and emotions and feelings that come with needing to bring up tension. Like Georgie and I, obviously, this was a relatively true example of something that's happened.
Yeah, it's happened last summer, right?
Last summer. And yes, I was a little more triggered when I brought this up, but I wasn't completely blended with this part of me that was feeling unworthy of attention. So we want to help you to figure out, to be with your experience in the trigger as well. And then what you might be doing before the conversation even takes place. Like, how do you be with the part of you that's feeling hurt or frustrated? And that's what we feel is missing from so many communication courses. And then it kind of turns into this like, yeah, like, forced smile, like, or full of, and that's where all like shame responses can come in more easily. So we're just really addressing the feeling component.
Yeah, totally. I think yeah, perhaps something we didn't unpack to great depth, we kind of introduced it, was what was happening in us as we experienced each other, hear the feedback, hear and receive the feedback. And I think this is the part which just makes difficult conversations so hard, is that they're emotionally volatile conversations. You've got to not only be listening to somebody, but you've also got to be feeling into your own state, managing your own sense of maybe being triggered, going into shame response, and all the kind of natural impulses that tell you to be defensive or strong or whatever it is. And we're perhaps telling you to do the reverse and pause, slow down, feel into yourself, and be able to separate the natural drive to defend with a sense of like, can I connect with this person? Knowing that I will have an opportunity to share my interpretation of events, but that has to wait right now, because right now what's really important is the connection piece.
I love that. So well outlined. I'm so curious how you found listening to this demo, what you resonated with, what you find feels good and natural for you, what would feel like a bit of a growth edge for you. what you might do in that situation, yeah, we'd love to hear.